is because the glare on them is really intense tonight for some reason. So, but if you see me squinting, just know that that's what's happening. Oh, and we're just on a totally wrong slide. So hold on for just a moment while I was like, why is it doing what it's doing? That's why. All right. Well, guys, welcome. And so obviously you'll see this slide again, but as we're talking through anxiety tonight, one of the things that I have found, the more I focus on something, sometimes the higher my anxiety gets. So as we talk about this, if you start to feel your own heart rate go up or that elephant on your chest, just practice with me this deep breath that we're going to kind of sync this with. So we breathe in for about 4 and hold it briefly and then breathe back out for about 4. And so today I'm going to talk, it's 11 and up, which is the tween teen category. I'm going to own for my own language bias. I'm not a huge fan of the word tween, so I'm going to say teen throughout this, and just know that I include your 11-year-olds as teens. They basically are, but I just wanted to be inclusive, but just know I'm not going to use the word tween again because I don't like it very much, but there's not a better word for 11-year-olds. So also just kind of developmentally, you all know your kids, and so some 11-year-olds and even 12, 13s fit more in the 0 to 10 category, the younger kid group that we taught last week. So feel free to reach out to Susan and get that content as well. That if you're starting to be like, wow, this is way above where my 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old is, that's really okay. Because this is going to go up to older teenagers too, but some 11-year-olds act 15, some 15-year-olds act 12. So just trust your kid, trust where they are, and we're just going to really try to meet them where they are. I am Allison Howell. My best contact is by email, so that's allison@northstarcounselingcenter.com. If we were live and in person, North Star is just right up the street from Beargrass, in the same building as the Equus restaurant on Sears Avenue. So whenever we do get back in person, that's where you'll find me. And our learning objectives for today, we're just going to talk about how to have a better understanding of what anxiety in kids looks like. We're going to work to try and promote emotional intelligence and growth within your family. We're going to explore different strategies for positive communication within your family, and we're going to try our best to identify and develop some individual and family coping tools. For those who were here last week too, you're going to notice we talked a whole lot about family regulation, co-regulation, and we're going to do that for our teens as well, but we have to be a little bit sneakier about it because sometimes they just want to do it exactly how they want to do it. And so we're going to give them room to believe that they're doing that, even though we're actually doing it together. If we do have any teens listening in, I will say I have the utmost respect for teenagers. I love them. They're a very hard it is hard to be a teenager, and it is hard to be a teenager in 2020. So when I talk to parents, there are times when I'm going to say things like, teenagers throw tantrums like toddlers sometimes, but with more words. And I just want to say that does not come from a place of disrespect to teenagers. It's just helping those parents who survived the toddler years believe they're going to be able to survive the teen years too. So I know that there might be some teens who end up listening to this and then they're like, Allison's mean. I promise that's not my heart, but it is to help parents know, oh my gosh, I'm going to survive this, but it might be really hard. Just like those 3 a.m. scream fests when they were 3, you're going to survive it at 14. So anyone else feel like the girl in this picture? For the little kid one, he was so exasperated. For this one, it's the more just like, what is this year? And why in the world are we stuck in this odd loop? So if anyone does want to jump in, now would be a fine time to say, just kind of, I'm curious what you guys are seeing in your teenagers that maybe has always been present, or anything that especially feels like it has popped up in 2020.
I think speaking more for the youth group than for my own children, but I see it in mine too. Grief is a real thing right now, and obviously we're all navigating that. But for kids that at 17 are looking at a senior year that's different, we know that life gets a lot better than your senior year later, but for them, that loss of that senior is very real. And so I'm dealing with a lot of that in the kids, grief and uncertainty, and just the open lament of all that they're not getting to do.
Yeah.
And anger. They're just ticked off, some of them. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a hard, almost double bind that I feel like we pump up kids' senior year to help them get through 4 hard years of high school. And now that it's not going to be there, we almost have to eat our words a little bit and say, I meant it when I said it was going to be cool, but honestly, college is better, adulthood is better. Like, it's this weird balance of validating their grief and holding hope that they're not losing the best year of their life, when unfortunately we've kind of said it's one of the better years of their lives.
That's what I've tried to reassure them, that if you really do peak your senior year of high school, that's a very sad statement in a lot of ways.
All downhill from there.
We don't want you to peak at 18. Yes, it's cool, but there's more coming. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
They hear it. The ones I talk to, they hear it, but still, it's that but still that I don't quite know how to help them through that. So. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, and this year is such a highlighter for inequality and unfairness. And so, sometimes we just have to sit with kids when they're really mad saying, this just isn't fair. And you're right. It absolutely is not fair. And then we move on, which is hard. So some of the things that I'm seeing in caseloads and in families: increased irritability, poor sleep. So they're either not really sleeping or they're oversleeping. Their night and day cycle has completely flip-flopped. Very distracted, hard to stay focused. Changes in communication patterns. So you either had a really talkative kid who's now pretty quiet, or a pretty quiet kid who now just is very edgy and talks a lot. They might be isolating, which again, that's a hard one because we've been taught and trained this year to socially distance, but we also still need to feel connected. Changes in energy level, changes in school performance. I don't know what shift happened in the last week, but I feel like every person I talked to this week there's a distinct change in school performance in middle and high schoolers in the last 10 days. Like it has hit, and it's hit hard. And then just less interested in hobbies and activities, especially in hobbies or activities that used to be really exciting. Now it's just kind of meh, I don't really want to do that. So we do want to talk about just the different faces of anxiety, because one of the things that we realize is we used to have kind of this pretty basic idea. It looked like fear, worry, tearfulness. It might look like nightmares, trouble sleeping, or those ruminating or looping thoughts. But it also could be completely different to that. This could be the kid with a chronic stomach ache or headache, irritability, changes in appetite. They're starving all the time, or they just don't really eat anymore. Changes in activity, changes in their leisure activities. They may hit nervous habits or fidgets. These are the skin picking, the just I can't sit still, anger, grief, and just negative attitude. That's kind of above the norm for typical hormone irregularity, unhappiness. So something to think about as a family, and as we help teach this to our kids, is what your emotional IQ is. So we're going to work to identify and accept all of our feelings. And I don't know about you guys, but I kind of grew up in the age of like good and bad feelings. Like there were things we just really weren't supposed to feel, or if we were supposed to get over it pretty quickly and go back to just choose happy. And I like the idea, I think, of what we were encouraged to do, but it's also just not real. And I think 2020 has definitely highlighted that we have a wide range of feelings and they're all okay. They all are valid. And as we give language to them, then we're able to not just embrace them, but work through them so that they don't have to hold us back. So when we think about that with little kids, it's really kind of that large, over the top, how to express what feelings are. For teenagers, we really start working into talking to them like adults. So this is what's happening. This is how I feel about it. This is what I do. What do you think? What do you feel? And really hearing that, which can be really hard, especially in those young teens where they've just kind of transitioned from like elementary into middle school. And it sounds a little bit crass, but like, we're not just going to be like, oh, that's what this kid is saying. It's what's this person saying? And I'm going to validate and hear it. And so we give language to feelings, and that gives power to your teen. They don't know how to manage it if they don't know what's happening. We can model those emotional responses as well. So if you're feeling something, it's okay to tell your kid that you're feeling it. It's okay to tell them what you're experiencing, why you're experiencing it. And then this one can be really difficult sometimes, but just radical acceptance, non-judgmental language. So we're not going to say, oh, don't feel that, or oh, that's not right, or I wouldn't feel that. Like, let your kid feel what they're feeling, and let that be okay. Because acknowledging and validating that feeling is what helps your teen grow into an adult that's able to say, this is what I feel. So there's a book I really like, and it's actually for younger kids by Faber and King, but they just talk about that kids need us to validate their feelings so that they know who they are when they grow up. And you guys, I hope, have at least one example of that feeling where someone just gets it, right? You're feeling something and they're able to just be like, oh, is this what's going on with you? And you're able to just be like, yes, I feel so heard and so seen. In that validation, that seeing your child, that will help them be able to connect. This is what I'm feeling, and I don't feel quite so alone and anxious in it. Another way to think about this, and I'm going to send a video in an email to Susan afterwards. I'm not positive we'll have time for it today, but it just talks about empathy. And so validation is to approval, what empathy is to sympathy. So a different way to think about this is, I really like this Kate Doran quote, and it's from a Medium article, and I am going to include that in my resources email as well. But that idea that when I'm feeling empathetic, I know it's not mine to solve. So as parents, we can have empathy for our children. We don't have to solve it. If you're on the receiving end of that, sympathy can feel a lot like people telling you, just make it better. And empathy is saying, you're not alone. So for our kids, validating is just hearing and reflecting. And we'll get a little bit deeper into this when we talk about family communication, but just, this is a really lonely year. And so helping your kiddo not feel alone can be really helpful. So ways to do that for teenagers, it's providing time and silence and space. Your kid will come to you when they are ready. So sometimes that's sitting down on the couch watching a show that you have absolutely no interest in, but they love it and they want to tell you all about it. But as they're telling you all about it, then they're going to be able to start telling you what the characters are doing, and that's going to build trust. And when they have trust, then they're going to start talking to you about school. And when you respond okay about that, they're going to start talking to you about their friends or the people they have a crush on. Like, it's the little things, but just being present and giving time to be able to do that. You can reflect what you see and hear. So they're just go, 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 and maybe they're really angry at you. What I hear you saying, and you just reflect back with, I hear you, because that will help them know you're not too busy for me. And especially, can I just ask, we're not saying I hear you while we're also texting or emailing while we're not in a meeting at work. Like, sometimes we say, this is really important. Can we talk about it later? And then we have to come back to it later. But just saying what I hear you saying, or I hear you, we try to limit judgmental language of it's only or don't. So it's only the prom. It is so important, right? Sure, they're going to have so many better years than this, but this year is really important and they've lost it. And then if all else fails and you're just totally unsure, silence can be really powerful if your body language is present. So just sitting with your team and just being there can be really helpful. Sometimes it can help to share your own experience, and that can be great, but also sometimes that begins to feel like you're matching hurts. So I hear that you're really upset about this. Let me tell you about the time I was more upset or something was worse for me. Little kids really like parent examples. Teenagers can get really offended by them on accident. So you're just trying to say, I get it. But what they just need you to say is, I hear you. They don't really need you to get it, because if you get it or you're trying to get it, Teens love telling us we don't get it and finding all the ways we don't get it. And so this is a less is more situation that, unless there's just a perfect example and it's really going to be communicated well, sometimes it's okay to just listen, reflect it back, and be silent and present. Being silent and present can help strengthen that relationship. It validates feelings. You're going to hear those words obviously over and over, because to me, when we can't do much, we always can validate. We always can be present. And the emotional impact of that validation, that emotional impact of just being there. And then again, whenever possible, if you can share your own feeling and pair it with a coping skill, and we're going to talk about what those coping skills can look like later, but I'm feeling angry. When I feel this, I need to take a break. Do you want to take a walk with me? Unless they're the person you need a break from. And then can we take a walk later? But being able to model, this is what I'm doing and this helps me. It normalizes it in your home. It provides free language that then the next time they're really angry, they can say, I'm really mad. I need to take a break. So, family communication. Creating spaces and times for this. So that side-by-side communication with little ones, we try to do face-to-face communication. So I'm going to sit in front of you. We're going to make a lot of eye contact. And that really helps teach affect, and it really helps with early child development. By the time we're 13, 14, and older, that can actually feel really uncomfortable, because by then we're into some pretty heavy discipline stuff. So eye-to-eye contact sometimes can feel like, oh, I'm in trouble. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. Side by side, I don't have to feel that. So I can just talk. It can feel really comfortable. So finding ways to take walks together, car rides together, even being strategic about where your family sits for mealtime, that maybe you all can sit side by side instead of face to face. Having game night, so you're involved in something else. Play therapy, the thing behind play therapy is that when you're doing something else, your brain lets down some of those defenses and can let you start talking. Family game night is the same thing. You can essentially do play therapy in your house, play games together, just laugh and talk. That builds such relationship. And they don't have to be intense. They can be, just being present, and they don't have to be long. Let's say you've got 15 or 20 minutes. Use that. It doesn't have to be a ton of time. Having honest, age-appropriate communication. So the 11 to 18 is a really big jump in what that looks like. But again, reflecting back, let's say your kid asks a question and it's one of those like gut punch where you're like, oh no, I didn't read this chapter in the textbook of parenting. I'm not quite sure what to say or what to do. My favorite go-to first question, I wonder what you think about that. Or with your older ones, I'm curious where did that question come from? One, that gives you a lot of context, because sometimes they'll ask a question and we go to the worst place scenario in our head. And when we get a little bit of clarity, it's not as scary of a question, or we are more prepared to answer it than we think. Those off-topic questions, if we just say like, you're too young, or I'm not ready to talk to you about that, Google will talk to your kid about that. Their friends at school will talk to your kid about that. And the thing I say to parents over and over, you would rather give an awkward, uncomfortable, maybe a little off topic answer, or like, it might not be perfect. It's way better than Google. So if you want to have any level of control over the answer that your kid gets to that, please just sit down with them, have the uncomfortable conversation. They're going to be as nervous as you are. That's totally okay. Afterwards, you can laugh, you can breathe a sigh of relief, you can phone a friend and figure out what you should have said. You can come back to them later. But again, I wonder what you think about that, or I'm curious where that question came from. The other thing is, through communication, you can get to know their own interests and values, using some of that language back, helping them teach you about something that they're really interested in. All of those are ways to open these doors of communication. And when kids feel anxious, they just need someone to help kind of relay all of this to. When it stays inside of them, it just gets so balled up. And that's when we have those physiological responses. That's when we have stomach aches and headaches, because they're just holding all of it in and don't feel like they can trust anyone to bear the burden with them. So being able to sit and listen. And again, when all else fails, silence is beautiful. So just be present. All right, I don't know about you guys. I really like control. I find a lot of comfort in it. This year has been interesting. So let's think about, if so much has changed and we know that we thrive on routine and habit and ritual, we can still create routine and habit and ritual. It just will look different. My favorite analogy for helping my own brain understand this is, I had it recommended to me once when I was curious about trying vegetarianism. I didn't stick with that, but I was told, if you want to become a vegetarian, don't look for things that taste like meat, because it will never taste like meat. You'll just be really frustrated. And then you will always still crave what you used to have. And to me, 2020 is vegetarianism, and we have to stop wanting meat. So we're not going to look for what it used to be like. We could name all day long what it used to look like, and it doesn't look like that. I used to get up and blow dry my hair and put on real pants and go to an office where I drank coffee from a Keurig that, I mean, the list could go on and on. None of that is in my current life. And so I can't try to compare it to that, but I have found a new routine that works for this season of time. And so reducing anxiety by creating some routines and rituals can be really helpful, and flexibility in those can keep everyone sane. Because the other thing is, we can get to where we try to like figure out for every 15 minutes of our day what we're supposed to be doing. That's the opposite of helpful in this season. So creating structure, but creating loose, simple routines. So for teens, we change our clothes every day. If you're a household that makes beds, not every household is one, you make your bed. You are supposed to eat a certain number of meals that need to include a certain number of foods. We try our best to keep up with hygiene. 1 to 2 toothbrushes a day. We shower X number of times a week. I mean, we're talking real loose schedules here, folks. But if we don't put in something, we get to day 8 where they've only eaten like a Snickers and a bag of Doritos and everything smells. So just a little bit of structure. And even if it is just the changing clothes every day, it really helps even with your almost fake circadian rhythm, as we've flip-flopped our sleep schedules, to just know these are the clothes I sleep in, these are the clothes I don't sleep in. This also can be a time, I don't want to stir a whole bunch of pots, but JCPS middle and high school starts so early when it's in person. We had kiddos getting up at 5 a.m. to get to a bus stop at 5:30 to ride 2 buses to a school to start at 7. It was crazy, and it will be crazy whenever we get back to it. But something I have actually really loved about this time is kids are able to sleep until like 8 a.m., which is so much healthier. And so if you're feeling any parental pressure or caregiver pressure that your kiddo needs to get up when they used to get up for the bus, I'm going to act way too powerful right now, but I think you should just shrug it off. It is okay that their sleep schedule is a little bit different right now. Let them sleep until 8, or let them sleep until 15 minutes before their first live Google Meet that they have for school. Some of that flexibility, I think, can actually help them get a better sleep pattern than they were having when they were doing homework until 10 p.m. and then getting up at 5 for school. And then I think getting creative. One of the things that I personally miss about pre-COVID life, if I'm going to be that bad vegetarian craving meat, is we used to just really have a lot of stuff to look forward to. This was actually a fun event because it was something to look forward to, right? I knew Monday evening I had this thing that was happening, but in our day-to-day, in our week-to-week, we're kind of losing that in the mush that is COVID life. And so try to have some things to look forward to and some typical schedules. So that could be kind of cheesy, like every Tuesday we make different kinds of tacos. You could have some cooking challenges, baking night, movie night, game nights, just anything that can start to feel like a new ritual, but also that your kids can look forward to, because it's hard just being like, well, it's another day. and another day, and it gets really tedious over time. And then giving yourself permission to rewrite the script. How it used to be, and we may get back there, but I think it can cause so much stress right now and just tie us to stressful patterns. So rewriting some of what it used to look like, something I've have several families have actually found some freedom in is if their kids are kind of almost second shift life right now, that they like to sleep until about noon, if they don't have Google Meets in the morning for school, let them do that, as long as then from noon to 6 or noon to 5, they're doing school. So instead of 8 to 1, they get to just shift it. Or I have some parents who they work first shift, they come home, their kids get to do school with them in the evening because they needed more help. So schedule time to work and schedule time to play. So if your kid knows, if I goof off all morning, I'm going to have to do school in the evening, give them permission to do that, but then kind of hold them to that contract. So say, if you want to play video games for this number of hours, I need us to be able to do school for this number of hours, and being able to just let that work within whatever works for your all's family. And the other piece is celebrate when your kid does it. I think one of the hard parts, and in pre-COVID life, sometimes we could get into this, well, I'm not going to celebrate them making their bed. They should do that anyway. Or they should know to do their dishes, or they should know to get their homework done. I don't care if they know all of it. Celebrate it big. We, don't have enough to celebrate right now. We need just to pump our kids up. And if we want them to keep doing it, if we celebrate it, they're more than likely going to do it again. So if they helped cook dinner, if they helped do dishes, if they got all their assignments in for a week, if they showed up for most of their Google Meets or whatever platform their school uses, we cheer it on. We make a big deal of it. I also give you permission to cheer yourselves on too, because it's really hard to keep going. So, screen time. So last year, we would have talked about how to limit our kids' access to screens and time in front of a screen. And then a pandemic happened, and now we ask them to sit in front of a screen for like 8 hours a day. So there's a certain amount of screen time that we can't take a break from because they have to do schoolwork in front of a screen. But when they can take a break, we've got to encourage breaks. And just saying, hey, get off your phone while we're sitting on our phone isn't how we do that. I know. This is a practice what we preach and do it together. So, hey, let's go hiking at Bernheim. Hey, let's take a walk around our neighborhood. Hey, let's go look at Christmas lights. Let's do things that get us away from a screen, and we're going to do them together. That's one of the reasons I think like cooking together or game night, like sometimes I think those can sound a little far-fetched, but 15 to 20 minutes away from a screen can sometimes lead to 30 or 40, or even if you only have 20 minutes without a screen is extremely helpful, and anytime we can get that. The other thing is, let's be cognizant of what screen time is for our kids right now. So let's limit time on social media. I think all parents should have access to their kids' social media if you even allow your child to have it. So it's such a double bind, because when we were younger, we could pass notes and we could do a lot of things that couldn't really be tracked by our parents, but we also had less access to really scary things on the internet. And so it is a balance where we want to give our kids privacy, but we want to do it in a way that we know can be safe. So setting really open rules or clear rules about social media, being able to check it. If you start to notice different feelings in your kids or emotions, I don't know if anyone has watched the Social Dilemma documentary on Netflix. It will make you want to get rid of your phone and computer and go live on an island. But it just talks about the algorithms in Facebook are directly built to change our emotions. They get an emotional pull so that we feel the need to be on them more. So if you're seeing an anxious teen get more and more anxious, maybe we don't need to be on social media, because that is causing that anxiety. And if it's not the cause, it's at least fanning the flames of that fire. And utilizing parental controls on all of your kids' devices. Probably the thing that makes me the least popular teen therapist in Louisville is I love parental controls. I think every kid should have them. I think adults should probably have them. Unmitigated access to the internet is a terrible idea. It can happen so innocently. Anyone who has kids without parental controls on their internet right now, please know there is no shame in that game. This is not me blaming, but it is me asking to please take a look at it. Our brains, especially as teenagers, are not built to understand how to healthfully manage that. And so just giving them the relief of not having to manage it is one of the better steps we can take to help our anxious kids. And then having really open communication about why you're doing it. So this is not the I'm your parent, so I said so. This is helping them know I'm choosing a healthy brain for you. I'm choosing healthy future relationships for you. I'm choosing healthy future communication. This is why we're doing this. And so just being collaborative, maybe even letting them decide if you only have one social media platform, which one do you feel like brings you the most joy? If you're going to have some limits, what makes sense? Letting them be involved, get some of their buy-in. Similarly, in our current culture, this can also kind of overlap with news. So helping them understand how to choose good news sources. Where do they get their news? What's their news? How does their choice of news source impact their mood? Limiting background noise of not having CNN or MSNBC or Fox News or any of those on in the background. You just never know what your kid's going to walk into. And then all of a sudden you're going to be like, oh, we now have to talk about that. So it's also just good self-care for adults. We don't need 24/7 news access. We don't really need notifications coming to our phone. We don't really need to always be there. We'll figure it out, but we don't need it figuring it out for us. Okay, so after all that, we're going to take a deep breath, and then we're going to talk about how to do that consistently with some self-regulation and co-regulation. So the biggest thing within families, we're going to model it, we're going to practice it, and we're going to repeat. So self-regulation, I'm going to give quite a few options. Different people do better with different kinds of self-regulation skills, especially for anxiety and depression, but also down to the day. Something that worked for your kiddo yesterday might not work today. So having a lot of tools in our toolbox, to me, I would always rather be over-prepared and not need it than have one of those moments where I'm like, I don't know what to do right now. So I'm going to give you a lot. It will probably feel overwhelming. So that's one of the reasons I do the big deep breath before we jump in. And I just really think that this family practice of it, so modeling it, is also because we can't pour from an empty cup. So I have found if I just tell caregivers to take care of themselves, they're like, okay, Allison, thank you. But if I say, model it for your kid, then they do it, and you guys get the positive benefits of self-care. And I think this year is just a funny year that I feel like self-care is said over and over and over. And I wish a little bit that it wasn't, not because it's not important, but I think sometimes then it can almost fall on deaf ears. And so I just would encourage, to me, what self-care is, it's self-regulation for your own anxiety and modeling that for your kids' anxiety. We keep it simple. So with my little ones, I talk about practicing, teaching how to do a body scan. By the time we get to teenagers, we're really going to hope that they do this on their own, mostly because if we try to do it for or with them, they're going to get grumpy and they're not going to want to do it. So we can talk about body scans. We can talk about where we feel anxiety in our own body. We can, depending on the mood of the room, ask where they're feeling it in their body, mostly because that helps, decide if our basic human needs are met. So if we're asking where they feel it in their body, we also need to ask, are you hungry? Are you tired? You know, if we go back to our loose schedule, have you eaten today? Have you eaten something that's a whole food or green today? And then are you tired? Is your sleep cycle off? If those basic needs are met, then we can go to where else do we feel it in our body? And do we need to do something to target one of those things? So I have 3 sections really for coping skills. So body-based, mind-based, and then people-based or connection. So for our body-based or body-focused, This can be deep breathing. This can be stretching. There are really great teen and kid yoga videos for free on YouTube that just, we got to get our body moving, especially for how much we sit in front of screens. We used to like talk big and move in our chair, and now we just do little movements in this little box. And so we don't really realize how limiting that is. And when our body feels tight, there's almost a physiological, like pre-caveman feeling of, I'm under attack, so I need to like, get little and stay little. And that causes a physiological reminder of anxiety. So stretching and just letting our body be open can really tell our brain, I'm safe, I'm okay. Similarly, some kids really do well with touch. Some kids do really poorly with touch. So this is a know your kid and know the day for your kid. So maybe ask. But this could be as simple as a fist bump, or this could be something like a deep pressure hug, some deep pressure exercises, actual exercise, so playing sports, getting outside. And then the thing that if I emphasize screen time breaks, my second huge emphasis is getting outside. Even if it's winter, put on a big coat, go stand on your porch for a few minutes. As we shelter in place at home, it can really just start to get so small if we don't get outside. So again, it doesn't have to be huge, but just some fresh air. Our mind-based, this can be mindfulness activities, which I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth in a later slide for. Positive self-talk and affirmations. Some people use the word like mantra for affirmations, but kind of just a motto that you can give yourself and pump yourself up when you're in a really hard time. Some grounding techniques. So grounding techniques are actually originated out of trauma work, but anxiety can feel like this. And honestly, 2020 can feel like trauma. So grounding says, when I'm kind of lost within myself, how do I bring it back? And so we tune into our senses. So I'm going to give an article that explains the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique, but it's just tuning into 5 things I can see, 4 things I can hear, 3 things I can touch, 2 things I can smell, and 1 thing I can taste. If you have a kid that's like, the taste one's weird, 1 thing I'm grateful for. We always keep it rolling because we'll always have kids be like, I'm not going to do that. Cool. Will you do this? But just in that simple 5-second focus on some sensory things around you, we can really get ourselves out of a pretty big anxious swirl. Family play is not just for little ones. This can look different. Maybe your kid's super into Pokemon cards or Magic the Gathering or Minecraft or board games or different video games. We can find different ways to play. It doesn't necessarily have to be apples to apples or go fish or the things we think about with our little ones. Use of imagination and narrative activities. So if your kid is really grieving something that they're missing out on this year, let's imagine the heck out of it. Let's picture it together, and they can tell you about what they thought prom was going to look like or what they really wish had happened. And you can sit in that with them. You get to imagine it and experience it with them. We can take vacations in our heads. We can, picture ourselves in Paris. What do you think you would smell? What would you see? Some of the museums in Paris are actually doing virtual tours. You can go to Paris in your computer. And then some kids are really tactile and they want to use their creative mind to build something. So let's do art and crafts and build stuff. This can actually then go to our next one of volunteering. You can create things and then give them away to people. So my third category is connection. And this one's really hard because one of the ways we safely care for others right now is by not connecting in person. But we can still safely connect. So that might mean FaceTime, Zoom, front yard, 6 feet apart, picnics. This can also mean letters. We can restart pen pals. You can find some volunteer work that lets you do it remotely. Another really important piece of this connection is let's tune into our spiritual life. Let's use prayer. Let's use this as a time to dig in to kind of this, if I'm feeling isolated, how do I connect with my greater Christian family, spiritual family? There's a way to still feel tuned into something bigger than us that I think can really help when we feel really isolated. Random acts of kindness. So let's say you're super into crafts right now, but your kitchen is full of knickknacks and you've got nowhere else. I bet nursing homes would love those right now. I bet schools would love those once they get back and, want to be able to kind of redecorate and revive stuff. So find places that you can donate those. And then education and advocacy. This is a really hard time. Not even hard time, just complicated time. It's confusing. Your kid might have a lot of questions, especially if they're pretty deep into the news, and they might have questions about, what's going on here. So finding ways to stay connected in the sense of what podcasts are we listening to? What books can we be reading? And maybe even getting a book group started within their friends so they can start talking about some of these social justice and equality issues that teens are not too young to know about. This is the generation that has an impact generations to come. And if we can feed good into them and help lead them in that, heaven help us, I'm excited to see what 3 or 4 generations from here will look like. Like, I get chills thinking about it. And while we can think that this is this quiet year where we're all stuck at home, this is the year that we have time to tune in, and we have the time to teach, and we have the time to stir some of those good fires, or that good trouble, as John Lewis talks about. So to me, education and advocacy is another way to really feel connected when we feel really anxious. So to jump back, and then we're going to jump back into that. I did those backwards. Mindfulness, just to kind of touch a little bit more, this is one of those that, similar to self-care, gets talked about so much that it almost loses its meaning. But something I find to be really impactful about mindfulness is just this idea that it's being present in where you are. So we're not overly reactive. We try not to be overwhelmed. It's this active practice of being present. And to me, when everything else feels out of control, tuning in and just saying, what am I doing right now in this moment? This can reduce anxiety because we're not worried about what's ahead. We're not worried about what's behind, one task at a time, especially with e-learning, and work from home. So what am I doing right now? I'm working. When I walk through that door, this door frame magic happens. I take a big deep breath in, a big deep breath out, and then I'm at home. So then I get to watch The Office with my husband and pet our dogs and eat yummy food. And I'm not at work anymore, even though I'm in the same space. And then when I come back in for a session, I almost Mr. Rogers it. I put on a different sweater. I take a big deep breath, and then I'm exactly where I am. And this mindful practice, so helping your kiddos set up a place to do e-learning that they know, when I'm in this spot, I'm doing NTI. Same for you guys if you're working from home. When I'm in this spot, this is my workplace. And then how do I transition myself out of it when it's time to, thankfully, have moments we don't work? I really like this idea that life is a dance and mindfulness is witnessing that dance. Sometimes I think we're so busy we miss the dance. I love the dance. So mindfulness is a way to get to stay present within that. And then to go back to education and advocacy, that idea, again, to reference Mr. Rogers, but he always says when things are stressful, this is a paraphrase, look for the helpers. And so I think how we find the helpers is we raise the helpers. So I think as young as the little group, but especially in our teens, we help raise the helpers. We help people raise awareness. We help people learn how to be activists, how to write letters, how to do phone calls, again, how to suss out where do I want to get my news, and then what do I want to do with it? And then a really important thing to remember is just that fear thrives in a place of inaction. So if our kids and our teens feel stuck and they feel like they don't have a voice, this whole hour to me is helping us learn. We reflect and validate to give them a voice. We help calm them down so that that voice can be clear and loud and focused. And then we give it a good direction so that it can do something that feels powerful and active with it. And then I found this actually just this week while I was working on a few tweaks in this project, and I'll send it in an email in case you can't see the whole thing in this slide, but it's just some good reminders. And I think to me, these would even be good little mantras to throw out to our kids here and there, that you're not alone. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to be vulnerable. it's okay as adults to be vulnerable and say how hard it is to be vulnerable so that our kids can learn we're not perfect in that the only way out is through it, which I think is such a hard one because we just want to get around it, but we're not going to do that. So again, just some helpful reminders that I feel like can help on those really low days, or maybe those days that you're like, I don't have words today and my kid needs something more than silence. Okay, then we're just going to Google some stuff because Google has great things for us. Our kids don't need to Google it. We can Google it for them. So in review, these are hard times and that's not a competition. So if you're having a hard day, you would want someone to just hear you. If your kid's having a hard day, it's okay to just hear them. Sometimes just being silent and present is the best way to show up. And we can model and co-regulate rather than telling them what to do. So if we tell our kid, hey, go take a walk, they're going to go to their room and slam the door and not want to talk to you. But if you say, hey, would you go take a walk with me? They might still go to their room and slam the door and not talk to you, but they might go on a walk with you. And that would be a really good co-regulating thing. And if they do go slam the door and say, oh, never. Okay, well, I'm here when you're ready. And I'd really like if you'd come have dinner with us. We don't chase. Similar with couples, we all know that chase, distance, pursuit, and retract. Kids do the same thing. So if a kid is distancing and we chase them, they will go farther. If we come back, they will eventually come back to us. It's a waiting game and it's hard, but if we don't pursue, they will come back. If we know that we thrive with structure, routine, and choice, we can create these things for ourselves and for our kids. When we want to self-regulate, we can tune into our senses. We get outside whenever possible and use whatever we have, just being intentional about it. So if you know that you're going to end up going up and down the stairs 5 times a day to do laundry, see that as exercise. If our mindset has a pretty impactful thing with that. So maybe see how fast you can go up the next time, or see how fast your kid can do it for you, which is even better. And we know that action counters anxiety, that even small actions for kids or adults, it helps us feel like we're making a difference. And honestly, it does make a difference. That's not just a faux feeling right there. And that can really help us tune in and feel like we're doing something about it. So that's all the words I have. And Denise let me know that my slide was misspelled, and I fixed the one I emailed and left this slide misspelled. So you can find me at Allison at North Star, not how that one is spelled. And I will send these slides to Susan to send out to you guys. So you'll have my contact info and links to some of the resources that I shared today. But that's my spiel. And I think the thing I would say is take care of yourself, which helps model taking care of your kid and helps you guys feel connected and like a family while you do it.
Great. Thank you so much, Allison. Appreciate you being here. And just thought I would open it up to any questions or comments, and I will stop the recording so you are free to ask whatever you want, and it won't be there for everyone in the world to see.